What's up, everybody? It's great to be back with you for a new edition of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand, so find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Fresh off vacation, I spent the day at CHSN, so not really super fresh off vacation. I'm Cam Smith riding and teaming up with my man Drew Stevens of the Bigs once again. And Drew, it's great to see you, my man. As I said, coming back from vacation, you and Casey held it down for the By the Horns podcast for Bulls fans that were in need of content, in need of some substance when it comes to discussing this Bulls team, when it comes to discussing NBA basketball, and when it comes to discussing this just wild playoff play-in scenario, not even just for the Bulls, but for so many teams in the NBA as we wind down this final week of the regular season. But what, man, how you doing, man? It's been a minute.
It has been, man. I'm doing all right, man. It's good to see you. We missed you, but, you are one of the more hardworking men in show business. So you got some well-deserved time. I'm glad you were able to get that. But I'm glad you're back. It's good to see you. I need to get your thoughts on these Bulls. I missed you, man. I'm glad you're here.
Hey, man, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you so much, man. It's great to be back. Look, for those watching on YouTube, on CHSN, I got a little tan, so the melanin's popping right now, so I'm feeling good as we transition into this conversation with the Bulls. And you have a very just dramatic scenario for, again, so many teams in the NBA, but specifically this Bulls team. And it's the NBA, man. It's the best reality TV show that we have in the world. Like, you can't give me Housewives, no disrespect to the Housewives fans and the brand that is the Housewives, no matter if you're talking about Housewives of Atlanta or Orange County or wherever, because my wife is watching all of those shows. So American Idol, yeah, it's cute. It's all right. It's all right. My mom, I was talking to her last night. She was watching American Idol. I think that's been on for like 30 years. What is it, the MTV Real World or the Challenge and all that stuff? That's cool. It's nice. Have some great moments. But nothing compares to the NBA. And as we record this podcast on this Tuesday evening on April 8th, Drew, before we get into the Bulls thing, just kind of give to people a little more taste and adding to why the NBA is the best reality TV show out there, is that Michael Malone, Calvin Booth, no more with the Denver Nuggets. You have your head coach in Mike Malone. You have your GM in Calvin Booth, both fired today by the Denver Nuggets. A few games left in the regular season. You go back to last week and what we saw with the situation with Memphis, with Taylor Jenkins and him being fired. So I've never seen anything like this. This is weird. But again, it goes back to the NBA being the best reality TV show. Now, forget those other teams. Let's focus in on the Chicago Bulls team, who had a game against the Cleveland Cavaliers in Cleveland tonight. Unfortunately, came up on the losing end in that ball game, 135-113. I mean, Cleveland just shot the leather off the basketball, 25 of 30 from three. Even though Donovan Mitchell didn't play, this team was in sync and clinched that number one spot in the East, official for them. And it's just something that we know about this Cleveland team is that they've been great all year. And honestly, I haven't been praying for the downfall, but I've been waiting to see at some point in the season, when is Cleveland really going to show their true colors? And they haven't shown that, no matter if you look at every month for this season, and especially against these games against the Bulls. They've really stepped up. And we saw why the Cleveland Cavaliers have held the best record in the NBA throughout this NBA season. Look, from start until where we are now, and it will be to finish, Drew.
Yeah, man, you took the words out of my mouth, man. They have set a standard for the Eastern Conference this season. They have played, I think, better than most everybody outside of their camp thought they could. They handled most everybody this season, obviously. It's been kind of them and OKC in terms of the two heavyweights of the league. I still think that I would give Boston the upper hand if those two teams were to meet for the rights to go to the NBA finals. But, man, if Boston gets caught up, maybe not valuing possessions here or there, or their three-point shot isn't falling, because we know that they rely heavily on the three ball. So does the Cavs to a certain extent. But, they can sneak up on the Celtics, man, if things don't, quite pan out So I wouldn't put anything past them, but I'm definitely thinking that the Celtics can prevail out of the Eastern Conference when it's all said and done.
Yeah, that makes for an interesting matchup. A lot of people expect that to be the Eastern Conference Finals between the Celtics and the Cavaliers, but you just never know. Again, the NBA, and I will say this throughout this episode of the By the Horns podcast, the NBA is the best reality TV show. So
Yeah,
they have plenty.
Sorry, no, they are really testing the limits of our use of adjectives, going from the two coaches being fired in the last 2 weeks to what set it all off with Luka Doncic being traded. Like, shock just doesn't do it anymore. We got to find different adjectives to use to describe what's going on in the NBA the last 2 months or so.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's just been another wild ride in the NBA season, as we know, Drew, covering this league, and just so many crazy things, and just things that have you questioning a lot and kind of trying to find out what the motivation was or the strategy behind it. And one of those questions came about tonight with this Bulls team. You have, for them, an opportunity to try to improve their record, to maybe push themselves into a position of being in the 8th or opening up the door to a spot in the 7th seed when it comes to the play-in. So this Bulls team coming off of 3 straight wins, and we highlighted this on the Chicago Sports Network on Monday's show on the Chicago League, with just how they're playing. The energy is different. Like, they've kept the integrity of competition. Drew, I saw you talk about that on your social media platforms. I'll discuss that as well on things that, as I mentioned, on CHSN. And you see why they kept the integrity of competition, because now we're talking about a team that's playing a fun brand of basketball. It's been one of the more exciting brands of basketball that we've seen since the trade deadline. You've had some phenomenal moments individually, but then also team-wise, and we'll rattle through that when we get to kind of like the season in review. But we're not there yet. But you have a group that truly is playing the way Billy Donovan envisioned them to play, and that's a great thing about this Bulls team. And you thought, all right, you're riding a 3-game win streak. You're on the road against the Cleveland Cavaliers. You have to have that momentum continue to build. But the Bulls decided to do the opposite, with them having a back-to-back against the Miami Heat on tomorrow night at the United Center. It's the final matchup between the Bulls and the Heat, a season series that the Bulls will win no matter the outcome of tomorrow against Miami. They decide to not only sit Kobe White, Josh Giddey, Kevin Herter, but they also decide to sit Nikola Vucevic. So Drew and I were texting in our group chat that we have with our producer, Edgar Perez, and shout out to my man, Edgar Perez, who does so much for Chicago Sports Network when it comes to our pods. Make sure you show him some love, because he's that dope at what he does. But we were like, okay, we're trying to make sense of the reasoning of why you decide to sit those players with the momentum that you have, and also the opportunity to improve your spot when it comes to this play-in. But then when you look at it from this standpoint, Drew, and there's a lot of kind of layers to this conversation, we've seen these games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. A couple of those games have been rough. And when I mean rough, let's just call it what it is. It was embarrassing. It really was, with how Cleveland really dominated this team. And one of the more embarrassing games was in Cleveland against this Cavs team, where they just went off, kind of similar to tonight, where they just shot the leather off the basketball. But they decide to sit starters, core, impactful players to get ready for tomorrow night against the Miami Heat. So if you're looking at this, Drew, you're like, all right, well, what are we doing right now? What's going on with the thinking and the reasoning to that?
Yeah, you presume they want to make sure that their starters, their key guys, are locked and loaded and ready to go for this pivotal game with the Miami Heat at the United Center on Wednesday. And I understand the reasoning behind it, with it being a back-to-back and the amount of importance that they've laid on it. But I also am of the belief that it's a departure from the messaging that we've gotten from the front office and Billy Donovan throughout this entire season about, maintaining competitive integrity, making sure that this young core is playing in meaningful basketball games. We've seen this team push Lonzo Ball's minutes restrictions to the limits sometimes in fourth quarters and clutch moments to try to get wins. We've seen them pull Josh Giddey from clutch moments because he wasn't playing well necessarily, and they wanted to get somebody else in there to
Right.
get wins. We've seen them sacrifice developmental minutes for Miles Buzelis earlier on in the season for the likes of Torrey Craig and Taylor Horton Tucker. So this team, is very familiar with pushing all the buttons they feel like they need to push to get wins in a season where a lot of fans thought that that was not the way to go for draft positioning reasons. So now to be 3-4 games, away from the end of the regular season and to kind of take your foot off the gas pedal when there is a chance, albeit a slight one, for this team to move into 8th place or to 7th place in the Eastern Conference and possibly have 2 cracks at making the playoffs, which they've only done once in the last, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
You would think that they would play this a different kind of way. And I was a little disappointed, if I could be honest with you, man, just in terms of the way that they chose to go about this. Again, I understand, with this being a back-to-back situation, that you want to make sure that your key guys are as healthy and as ready for the Miami Heat on Wednesday as they can be. But I thought that they, lacked a little bit of punch when it comes to really kind of hammering home all that they have told us, you, me, the rest of the media, the fans, about what they wanted to accomplish this season. We'll see what happens on Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's not a must win necessarily, but the Heat also have, pretty light schedule after the Bulls game. They go on to play in New Orleans and then they host the Wizards, whereas the Bulls are hosting the Wizards and then they play at Philadelphia. So, you can't really count on anything down the stretch, especially in this part of the Eastern Conference. And I thought that they may have let an opportunity go by where, if they just do their best to just win out, they take care of business anyway and kind of let the chips fall where they may. And maybe they fall in their favor in terms of them being able to host a 7-8 game, rather than a 9-10. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you along the lines of with this opportunity that was in the hands of the Bulls, right? And again, going back to the season series matchups against the Cleveland Cavaliers and that integrity of competition, you want to have your best guys out there to, again, try to continue a win streak, but more importantly, get a win, just a kind of a feel-good win against the Cleveland team that has dominated you for the majority of those season series games. But again, since we're talking about trying to position yourself for a better spot in the play-in, you try and do that. I mean, it's a 2-for-1. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in that 7th or 8th spot where you have 2 chances to win 1 game? And we've seen the past couple of years with this Bulls team when it comes to them being in that 9 or 10 spot where, yes, they come out, they win that first game, and then they have the letdown the next game, and it doesn't work out for them. Or just these playoff scenarios, playing scenarios, I should say, with them, and they finally get to the playoffs, and now they're facing off against one of the better teams in the East or the NBA. So you want to have this team continue to trend the right way and peaking at the right time, which I believe that they are. And I felt like tonight was a step backwards because you're looking at a starting lineup of Miles Buzelis, Javon Carter, Dalen Terry, Jalen Smith, and Patrick Williams. We would have to break that down and see the amount of minutes and the amount of time that group particularly has played together on the floor, but it was obvious tonight on so many different areas of the court. I mean, again, it's the reason why the Cleveland Cavaliers went 25 of 50 from 3, and you had Darius Garland just go off, a guy that just really had a breakout season for himself. So, and not to say that Darius Garland hasn't been a dude. He's always been that. But with the microscope really fine and zoomed in on this Cleveland team, he hasn't faltered and really stepped up. But again, tonight was another example for him, along with Evan Mobley, along with Jarrett Allen, Isaac Okoro. And it was good to see him kind of get back up after that tough fall that he had in the game tonight. But you want to have your best going up against Cleveland's best. And this is a shout out to Kenny Atkinson and that staff for Cleveland, where they've been in position to just say, you know what, we don't have to play Spider Mitchell. We don't have to play DG, Darius Garland. We don't have to play Evan Mobley. We don't have to play Jared Allen or Isaac Okoro. We can throw Ty Jerome out there with Max Strus and, Georges Niang, all these guys out there, just say, we're good because we have the number 1 seed locked down. Nobody's coming within 5 games, at least at the bare minimum, of this Cleveland team. I mean, they've been well in position for a long time with that number 1 seed, but instead they still play their main guys, their main rotational guys, and they're still producing like tonight. So that's where the shout out is from for the Cleveland Cavaliers, where when it comes to integrity of competition, they're like, no, we're preparing for the playoffs. So we're still going to have our rotational guys in. Now, Donovan Mitchell didn't play tonight, but still, at its core, when you look at the starting group and the rotational guys, especially Ty Jerome, who just continues to be a Bulls killer. Like, I don't know what his workout situation was when he was in the NBA draft, if he worked out for the Bulls and, it didn't go his way, or, he was led to believe that he was going to be drafted by the Bulls. I'm just throwing some stuff out there just to try and make sense of why Ty Jerome has been a Bulls killer this year. But he has continued to prove his worth, not only with the Cleveland Cavaliers, but also in the NBA. But he's a guy that's off the bench that played big for them. Of course, DeAndre Hunter, who was a great acquisition by the Cleveland Cavaliers right before the trade deadline expired, had 17 points. Another guy that is going to be a main piece in that rotation defensively, especially for Cleveland, and we saw it tonight. I mean, these guys are still getting those minutes, are still producing, despite Cleveland having this stronghold, which they've had for the majority of the regular season in the Eastern Conference for that number 1 spot. And they're still out there playing. And so for me, getting back to this Bulls team, you want to make sure you continue to peak and trend upwards. And I think tonight was a step back. Now, again, we get it from Billy Donovan, right, who has really done wonders with this Bulls roster, especially with the changes, the new guys coming in and trying to get them acclimated. Of course, you have Zach LaVine traded at the deadline, and you bring in 3 new players with your group that are trying to find themselves and trying to find their next contract, and you're really getting the best out of them. So Billy Donovan and his staff have done wonders with this Bulls team this year to have them in position where they are now to make the play-in a reality. The Bulls will be in the play-in, but it's more so about this position of where they will be in the play-in. And so when you think about that and you think about tonight, it's just like, it's one of those opportunities where you want to take advantage of on a number of different levels, and what we explain and what I'm explaining through this whole thing here. But you're hoping that tomorrow, you got to come out and be the team that we saw during this 3-game win streak, the team that we saw really flip their season when it comes to playing great basketball and being one of the better teams in the NBA since the trade deadline. So I'll be curious to see how this team starts tomorrow night and really what their energy is like, especially in the fourth quarter, where Miami, a team we've seen it time and time again, will make that run to really put themselves in position to win.
Yeah, likewise, man. This is the biggest game of their season tomorrow, Wednesday, as we record here. This is going to have a big factor on if they are indeed going to be able to host that 9-10 game rather than having to go to Miami and play on the road. Although they have played well on the road, they played better on the road.
They have, but I'm thinking of PTSD last year. We remember that game against the Heat or the AC and what happened against Miami. Like, coming off the energy of what we saw from Kobe White with the 42 points against the Hawks, we were in the building for that play-in game. It still counts in our books, NBA, even though y'all hating on Kobe, but it's all good. Absolutely. But then to follow that up with just, man, it was a lackluster effort from that Bulls team and lackluster production from them against the Miami Heat in Miami. So I'm a little weary about this Bulls team going on the road if it happens to be them for some wild reason in Miami. But again, they own the tiebreaker against the Heat, and the Bulls and the Heat have the same identical records at 36-43. Let me double check that one more time before I get out of here, before everybody's like, oh no, Cam, they're one off. No, it is 36-43. They're tied with the same record, but the Bulls own the tiebreaker. So you want to, again, get the home playoff game, or play-in game, get the home play-in game, because we've seen how the United Center crowd will come alive for this Bulls team when it comes to playing games.
Absolutely. Now, there's still an outside chance that they can move up to 7 or 8, but it would entail, some crazier things to happen.
Yeah.
As in the Magic going 0-3 down the stretch, the Hawks winning no more than one more game.
Yeah.
So and the Bulls themselves having to go 3-0 down the stretch too. So, stranger things have happened, but you don't want to count on that. But that's another reason that kind of feeds back into the conversation we just had about them, or how we wish they would have continued to put their foot on the gas and try to get all their guys in the lineup and continue to try to play the way that they have been recently down this stretch of the season. Continuing the great trends that we've seen from this team. And, obviously it didn't happen. They decided to go a different route. Now tomorrow sets up, again, we talked about it, a huge game for them against the Miami Heat, against an opponent that a lot of these guys on this team are familiar with. Kobe White last week spoke to how it was challenging after the fact, after thinking about it, getting up emotionally for that second playing game in Miami after the high of beating Atlanta in the United Center. So, he's somebody who I like to see exercise his demons. Vucevic, some of the other guys on this team who have gone through that, whether it be at the United Center come playing tournament time or in Miami. So there's still a lot to play for. And these guys, obviously, like you said, they're going to be in the playing tournament regardless, but you want to see them be at their best come next week when it all kicks off.
Yeah, I mean, if you're having a single elimination game, I'd rather to have that in front of my home crowd in my home building, and where I have familiarity as opposed to going on the road. But I mean, we've heard this from NBA players before, where they kind of prefer to play on the road because it's not as much pressure for them on the road. The pressure is on that home team. But I know Kobe White, aka I like Jacoby White, aka Bruce Leroy, is up for wherever that ball game will be, whether it be the United Center or whether it's down in South Beach. He's ready to hoop, man. One note that we want to get out before we finish off this episode is Patrick Williams, season high, 21 points for him. Very aggressive, 4 turnovers. Don't mind that as long as he's being aggressive. I don't care if Patrick Williams gets 10 turnovers or 15. Just as long as he's being aggressive. Obviously, people are going to hear that like, Cam, all right, look, you're tripping right now. I know that's wild, but still, a good aggressive Patrick Williams and a controlled Patrick Williams is a beautiful thing to see for this Bulls team in his role. It is really great because it gives them another option, especially a guy with size and strength to do some things. But season high 21 points for P. Will, so hopefully he can keep that same energy for tomorrow night against the Miami Heat. And moving forward, Friday against the Washington Wizards, Sunday against the Philadelphia 76ers, and then when the play-in starts for this team, man, it feels like you blink and it's like, man, we're already getting ready to wrap up the regular season. But then also when you're covering this team, and you know how it goes, Drew, 82-game seasons, they can be lifetimes. And you're like, yeah, it's been a long season, but there's still something exciting waiting for this Bulls team as we wrap things up for the regular season. We're not there yet, a few more games left, but still they will have some after regular season life. I can't call it postseason life because it's not officially the playoffs in the postseason, but they're trying to get their opportunity to be one of the seeds in the East, whether it's 7, more than likely it will be 8 for them in the East. But Bulls dropped this one 135-113 against the Cleveland Cavaliers, but chance to bounce back tomorrow night against the Miami Heat right in the United Center. I will be in the building. Drew, you'll be in the building, right, too? So we'll be there covering this team. Definitely talking to Billy Donovan, talking to the players, and just trying to see where they are physically, mentally, coming off of last night, coming into the game against the Miami Heat. Because we know one thing about the Heat. They will be ready to play, for sure. So it'll be another good game between the Bulls and the Miami Heat. All right, everybody, we appreciate you tapping in with us on this episode of the By the Horns podcast. And I said I was going to do this to this pod and get this out here before we wrap things up. But this is a shout out to my man Edgar Perez and his team Real Madrid, who got dog walked today against my Arsenal Gunners in the Champions League. First leg of that match. Shout out to Declan Rice, 2 goals. It was a dog walking. So shout out to my Gunners, man. Let's get this done. And Edgar is putting a message in the chat right now that people can't see. And hopefully this can make the pod. But if you know it doesn't make the pod, then I'm going to tweet it out and listen carefully and show you that Edgar's trying to hide the tapes. He's trying to hide the tapes out here so he doesn't get no slander on his Real Madrid team. But that'll do it for this edition of the By the Horns Pod, presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand, so find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. For the one and only Drew Stevens of the Bigs, I'm Cam Smith. We appreciate you tapping in. We will see you soon, everybody.